Welcome, one and all, to another edition of the Defo Show with Lubie here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network, brought to you by Water Cleanup of Florida. We had a little bit of rain last weekend. Things can pop up around your home. Was with my father-in-law looking at their house and saw some spots here and there. Before anything gets crazy with water damage, flood, fire, mold, call Water Cleanup of Florida 24/7. Look, we think about when things go awry and things are crazy, and you definitely could use Water Cleanup of Florida then. But sometimes, if you catch things early enough, I learned that with cars, it can stem the tide and allow you from dealing with bigger things later. 24/7, you can reach Water Cleanup of Florida, 954-579-0356, 954-579-0356, or visit our website, WCUFL.com, WCUFL.com. If you mention 5 Reasons or Lubie, you'll get a free inspection during business hours. Water Cleanup of Florida, with over 60 years of combined experience, plus having licensed contractors. They can come out, check out your problems, check out your spots, and if they do find something wrong, they can take care of it without you having to go on a search for this contractor or that contractor. Water Cleanup of Florida will get the job done for you. You can also check them out on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at Water Cleanup FL. Water Cleanup of Florida. We clean up your schmutz. Well, that's a correct term for this weekend when it comes to South Florida sports. It was schmutzy. The Florida Panthers let us down yet again as they had come back to life in Game 2 against the Capitals with a barrage and a strong 5-1 victory. Game 3 out in the D.C. area did not go so well. Florida Panthers got up early and didn't score again after getting up 1-0. They got annihilated, I think 6-1. I know the score 6-1, but I stopped watching because it made me sick to my stomach. Yes, we have the bet with Mike Mayo, but just in general, I've been a Panther fan most of my life. They haven't given me much to cheer for the last 20 years, so I haven't really paid too much attention. But this year, we paid a lot of attention as they were the best team in hockey by the end of it when it came to points overall. They haven't looked like that. The Avalanche, the team that they were fighting with out west, is 3-0 in their series against the Predators. Panthers are 2-1 now, down with Game 4 tonight. Well, the Heat were their saving grace, right? Heat are up 2-0. There's murmurs Friday that Joel Embiid's going to come back. Maybe. But come on, what is he going to be? Guy had finger issues, broken orbital bone, had a concussion, had back issues. So even if he comes back, the Heat should win Game 3, right? No, the Miami Heat fall flat. But it's okay. It's 2-1. Game 4 Sunday. Tyler Hero, Max Strus, Kyle Lowry, Victor Oladipo. The list goes on. Like Bam Adebayo. No one did anything outside of Jimmy Butler, who was really strong in Game 3. So what's going to happen in Game 4, right? The Heat are going to come back. You're going to see all these guys play well. No. James Harden played well. Danny Green continues to find his three-point stroke. Tyler Hero, 11 points. Kyle Lowry, 6 points. Victor Oladipo had 15, but he wasn't really good for most of the game. Bam Adebayo had a really good first quarter and then got in foul trouble and was never the same the rest of the game. Max Strus had 6 points and was useless. They were just not good. And again, Jimmy Butler played really well, but the rest of the team did nothing. And these Sixers, look, the Heat were in it until about 3 minutes left, but the Sixers pulled away eventually and won by 8. And now it's a 2-2 series and a very different series. So today we talked about the Miami Heat and the rest of the NBA playoffs as the Phoenix Suns now are in a dogfight 2-2 with the Dallas Mavericks. The Warriors and Grizzlies are sitting 2-1 with Ja Morant out. Warriors up. You have the Bucks and Celtics sitting there at 2-1. Bucks after a classic, still without Chris Middleton. That was Saturday. The Bucks edged them in the waning seconds. They're up 2-1. That Game 4 beat today as well. So we talked all things NBA with longtime NBA writer, reporter, and analyst Sean Deveney today here on the Defo Show with Lubie on the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
Sean Deveney from Heavy.com. How are you, my friend? NBA playoffs in the second round. We got a lot of 2-2s and 2-1s, and it's sort of fascinating from a lot of different aspects so far. How are you doing? And how's it been going with Heavy.com?
Yeah, everything's good. This has been this is kind of the second round that I think many of us thought we'd get. That the level has certainly gone up, and you've seen some pretty good matchups across the board here. So Dallas coming back, and the Sixers coming back. After those 2-0 deficits, both of those It's been really, really good series, really interesting series. I think where the Celtics and Bucks are, that's interesting too. So, yeah, we've seen across the board some pretty good situations here.
Does a day pass where you don't consider what kind of lunacy it was for Doc Rivers to self-sabotage the 76ers by leaving Joel Embiid in a game they were leading by 29 in the fourth quarter after he had battled injuries throughout the series, and no team in 2,500-plus tries has ever come back from 29 down with that little time left in a game? Should we still be talking about this, even though Embiid, especially now in light of the fact that Embiid has come back and even not at 100% full strength physically, with a mask on and a bad thumb and an eyeball that's bulging out of his head, he has been that much of a differential in the series. Should we not point a finger every day in Doc Rivers' face and say, what the hell were you thinking?
Well, I mean, certainly if they come back and win the series, that's probably the only way that gets buried. But until then, no, I mean, it always is amazing, and probably Derrick Rose is the poster child for this. What happened in, I think it was 2013, 2011, where Thibodeau had him out on the floor and he winds up blowing out his knee. It really messes up his entire career. Joel Embiid is in that category of guy who's had so many injuries over the course of his career, not just this year, of course, but going back to when he first came into the league, that if you have the opportunity to get him out of the game, any game, you get him out as soon as possible. I mean, you just have to. That's a fair criticism of Doc Rivers. If they win this series, then maybe that gets pushed aside. If they don't win this series, that's going to be something that'll be brought up all summer, and perhaps when Doc Rivers leaves Philadelphia in the offseason and heads to the Lakers or somewhere like that.
Oh, it's crazy. I mean, we were speculating this guy should not only have not been on the bench, he should have been past the team bus and maybe even sitting on the tarmac on the team plane that was going to be headed for Miami, because it was preposterous. And the only other guy, we could think of that might have made that move was Gino Auriemma, who had that Paige Beckers in a game with like 38 seconds to go when she got hurt, even though they were up 70 over Quincy College that just happened to put together a women's team the week before they scheduled the game. It seems outrageous that he wasn't receiving more scrutiny for that. But now has him at 2-2. So has Embiid been that sole difference maker? What happened, in your opinion, Sean Deveney, those last couple of games in Philadelphia as compared to what looked like fairly easy Heat dominance in the first two that they played here in South Florida?
Yeah, I mean, Embiid is such a big part of what they do. Their whole offense, even with James Harden out there, is built around Joel Embiid. And so if he's not out there, it's a pretty severe drop off to the combination of DeAndre Jordan and Paul Reed. You can survive even losing James Harden. You can survive that if you're the Sixers. You can't survive playing without Joel Embiid. So much of what they do is built around going inside to him and then moving the ball back to the outside. They like to get the ball into the paint and then get it back to the perimeter. If you don't have a guy who you respect as a defense in that paint, then that strategy is pretty easy to defend. So yeah, he does make that much difference. Even if he took 13 shots yesterday. Did take 13 free throws as well. So obviously they were running the ball through him quite a bit. But even at 13 shots, that's enough. He's got so much weight, so much gravity that you have to respect as a defense, that not having him out there, it just become a really, really easy team to defend.
Talking with Sean Deveney, NBA writer, reporter, analyst here. Follow him up on Twitter at Sean Deveney. What's interesting is, as well as Harden ended up playing, as well as Danny Green has turned back the clock the last two games, Embiid has actually given them a lot more on offense than a lot of people, including myself, would think. That he were in it until the 3-4 minute mark of both of the last two games without anyone doing anything. Like Jimmy Butler was doing his best Michael Jordan impression or LeBron James impression, and no one else was doing anything for the team, yet they were still in it. To me, it was that game yesterday was like the definition of what the NBA has become. Where in the past, I grew up with the saying, you live by the three, you die by the three. The Heat were great shooting threes all year. That's wonderful. But as I learned from a young age, if it's not falling, fine. Get to the basket. Get to the free throw line. Be aggressive, which seemed to work. Like when the Heat, when Jimmy Butler and Oladipo, when they were going to the basket, they seemed to score. But the Sixers kept giving them open threes. They kept breaking the crap out of it. And it sort of killed them in the end. What have you seen from the Heat that it seemed like they weren't doing all season long, that they did a lot yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the three-pointers, that's the big thing that stands out, that if you're going to go 7 for 35 from the three-point line, you better have a plan B. And we've seen that a lot in the playoffs. Watching the Celtics in game one of their series, it was that they took 53s and they did not shoot well. You see teams that they shoot themselves into a deficit,
Yep.
and their only thought is, the only way for us to get out of this is to shoot our way back into it. And you're not going to, you shoot yourself into a bigger deficit that way rather than putting the ball on the floor. And a lot of credit goes to Jimmy Butler and Victor Oladipo, as you mentioned, getting to the line 13 times for Butler, 10 times for Oladipo. You've got to have a plan B. And the plan B has to be to attack the basket and try to get those shots. And, look, one thing that's happened too is that, there's become, because of the analytics and all the things that say that, an 18-foot jumper is the worst thing you can possibly do. So many teams shy away from those shots. And you've got to be willing to take those mid-range shots. You've got to be willing to take those, it might be a 45% shot rather than, a 40% shot at a three-pointer. But sometimes that's what you've got to do. You can't be afraid of taking those mid-range shots. And that's something that teams need to keep in mind in the playoffs. Look, defense are going to take away the basket. They're going to take away the three-point line. So you've got to be able to go in the middle there and get those. You get 2 points. It's the hard way, but it's the playoffs. You got to be able to do that.
Talking with Sean Deveney, Heavy.com, longtime NBA writer and analyst, been with many different organizations at the very top of the business, including Sports Illustrated, and always good to have him on the show. All right, if you looked at the regular season, you would have to say you wouldn't have been considered criminally insane if you thought Milwaukee and Boston was going to be a contentious series, and a very hard-fought victory for whoever emerged and made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. And then the wisdom sort of changed a little bit and public sentiment as Boston was looking so good in sweeping the Brooklyn Nets out of the postseason, a team that a lot of people, we talked about it, that everybody said as a 7th seed, are they not a dangerous commodity? It turned out not to be the case, but Boston looked so impressive in that series. And Middleton was out for Milwaukee, and suddenly the world was on the side that the Boston Celtics would prevail in this series. So what's happened with Milwaukee up 2-1, and what do you foresee? I mean, what can change? Because you're thinking Boston probably comes back, evens it up tonight, and this is one that'll be a dogfight going 7. What do you see in Milwaukee-Boston so far, Sean Deveney?
Yeah, I saw in the first 2 games, even with the loss, that the Celtics had a pretty good plan on Giannis Antetokounmpo, and were able to keep him under wraps. He shot 40% from the field in the first 2 games. He was scoring. He scored an average of 26 points in those first 2 games. But between Al Horford and Grant Williams, they were doing a very good job on Giannis defensively. Giannis was probably a little too stagnant. He wasn't moving around enough, wasn't going downhill enough, attacking the basket, which is what he likes to do. And from what I saw in Game 3, that was the big difference for Milwaukee, was that they changed that. That they got Giannis into space where he could, really step back and get a running start at the basket, and that's what the Celtics on their heels. The Bucks did not shoot well in that game. They were 26% from the 3-point line. They didn't get a lot of very efficient play from everybody else, but Giannis, 42 points. 12 rebounds, 8 assists. He's been a terrific passer in this series. That's been an underrated aspect of him. But he's really that's where this series, as good as Tatum is, as good as Jaylen Brown is, this series is going to revolve around what Giannis Antetokounmpo was able to do and what the Celtics are able to take away. They did a good job taking away a lot of what he wanted to do in games 1 and 2, not so much in game 3. We'll have to see how Ime Udoka and that defense, how they adjust in game 4.
Many people thought that Budenholzer, he was kind of considered a bozo, Mike Budenholzer, until he won the championship last year. And even in the process of doing that, it seemed like he was getting little consideration as being one of the great coaches of all time. Certainly not going to be mentioned in any context along the lines of a Red Auerbach or, even a Phil Jackson. But, it's interesting, Sean, that you just said that because we're crediting Budenholzer now with making some moves. And he clearly would have had to make some kind of positive adjustment to account for not having Middleton in the lineup. So are we overlooking the job that's being done by Mike Budenholzer, who was always, it seemed like, the subject of and the topic of derision or, subjected to derision while he's been coaching the Milwaukee Bucks for their previous failures?
Yeah, everybody on Twitter is Jim Naismith, of course, and that's what I've noticed over the years how that's developed. The thing about Budenholzer is that he was always reluctant to make adjustments. He sort of set his team up to play the way we're going to play. This is how we're going to play, and if it's October and we're in the 4th game on a Tuesday night, we're going to play the same way as if it's the NBA Finals. And that was a valid criticism of him, no question. He's done a good job, and it began last year in terms of adjusting the way that he plays and throwing some wrinkles in. Change the defense a little bit. They used to never switch. Now they'll switch. They'll throw different looks at you that they really weren't doing before. He has evolved somewhat. I don't think there's any question about that. But he's always been a really good coach. I mean, he came from the hip of Greg Popovich and brought a lot of those principles with him and was very successful in Atlanta and is now very successful in Milwaukee. The big key has been getting the success in the playoffs, and that's been where you've really seen the growth and the development of him as a coach. The adjustments that he's made, those are things that maybe he wouldn't have done 4 years ago. But certainly we're seeing that. We saw it last year, and you're right, he didn't get enough credit for the way they played last year. And this year we're definitely seeing it again.
Sean, last couple of things here with Sean Deveney. Again, follow him up on Twitter at Sean Deveney. Taking it out west. And before we get to it, I'll let Defo get to this one since he's been all over the Suns a lot more than I have. That most probably surprising series that remains in the NBA playoffs. The Western Conference, other semifinal, Warriors, Grizzlies, felt like, especially after the first round, that would be very much like Celtics Bucks. Like that would be the series that would be back and forth and high-flying offense, but teams that play better defense and they get credit and, really solid, sound coaching. What happened in the last game 3 with John Morant? So I finally just saw the video, and I don't know what there's to complain about, so maybe you'll tell me. I'm from here in South Florida where I watched the Heat and the Knicks kill each other in the 90s. So I'm still sort of old school in that regard. Like, I know Morant was complaining about what led to now an injury that may totally change his series. Watching the video, I didn't see much there. Like, what were your thoughts about, first of all, how that injury came about? And then, of course, what you think it'll do for the rest of the series?
Yeah, I think there was, obviously, you go back to the previous game where Gary Payton Jr. gets hurt on that elbow injury that I watched once and I will never watch again. Don't like seeing stuff like that. Yeah. To me, Steve Kerr came out and did a lot of carping about that. Probably, just protecting his player. Not using a lot of logic. I don't think that Dylan Brooks, the guy who hit Peyton on that play, intended to injure him or anything like that. So, yeah, I thought that what you saw from the Grizzlies after the injury to Morant, which, was clearly just an incidental play to me, was sort of a reaction to what Steve Kerr said. So, I think you've got two coaches who are, trying to appear as though they're protecting their players, whereas, when you actually watch the plays, you can see, all right, well, this is they were just playing basketball. Like, all that was happening here. And when you play basketball at this level, you're running the risk of injury, and that's what's happened. So, yeah, I didn't see anything dirty on either side. I think both coaches are just trying to make sure that the players know that they've got their back, and that's pretty much all that I saw in both of those plays, really.
Saw a rougher incidents on Dancing with the Stars when Len Goodman was giving a demonstration. I didn't see much there, honestly.
There wasn't a lot there.
I know the complaint was, that possibly, that this was as outrageous as what would happen when, a guy's in midair and, essentially he didn't get low bridge, but, was slammed to the floor while he was extremely vulnerable. But that didn't look like much to me there. Now, the oddity, Sean, just quickly also is that, for some reason, the Grizzlies' record of 20-5 was even more impressive. They scored more points, which is hard to conceive of with Morant out of the lineup. Does that hold up in the playoffs, though, that this still is not an unfavorable situation for them?
No, if you go back and look at a lot of those games in which they did that, they had other advantages in terms of, playing at home, playing weaker teams. I don't put too much stock in that. Obviously, you could do that in November. You're not going to do that in May. You're not going to do that against the Golden State Warriors, as we saw in Game 3. I mean, to me, the Warriors are a team that is going to get better. Because don't forget, when they started the playoffs, Steph Curry hadn't played in a couple weeks. So, they're just really starting to find their stride. I think they scored 142 points. I think you're starting to see them play up to their level, up to their capabilities, and they're going to get better and better. From Phoenix or Dallas, for that matter, they really scare me because they're just starting to scratch the surface of how good they're going to be in this postseason. So, as good as Memphis has been without Morant in the past, that's not going to hold in the playoffs, especially not against the Warriors.
I was mentioning this earlier, Sean Deveney, Heavy.com with us. I wanted to touch on this Dallas series, also very compelling right now against the Phoenix Suns when it appeared the Suns, after they lost Game 3, you're thinking, all right, they win Game 4. They wrap this thing up at home in Game 5. Turned out to be anything but the case. And every time I see Luka Doncic, he reminds me of this kid that I knew in my youth named Joey Vanato, who was, the neighborhood's best athlete. And he was, kind of an overpowering guy that, he would carry 30 kids on his back into the end zone when we were playing football in the sandlot. And it doesn't matter how many guys are draped all over Doncic. Without being especially athletic looking, it doesn't appear that he's overwhelmingly quick. It's not like he leaps out of the building and impresses you, that he could pick a quarter up the top of the backboard. And yet, I mean, all he does is score under any circumstance, like virtually unstoppable. How much of a dynamic change in those last two games? I mean, for the Suns to, just succumb relatively easily to a Dallas Mavericks team that they had handled pretty well in the first two games of the series. I mean, that was a dramatic turnaround. Where do you see that series going?
Yeah, I think certainly credit Luka. Phoenix did a pretty good job in terms of making him, inefficient. He was 9 for 25 from the field. I think the big thing about Dallas and what's been impressive, and I never gave Jason Kidd much credit as a coach when he was in Brooklyn, nor when he was in Milwaukee. But you've got to give him credit for what he's done with the Mavericks defense. Because they have completely shut down Phoenix these last two games. Really, after like you said, the Suns scored 120 points in each of the first two games. They go to Dallas, and the Mavericks are able to really shut them down in a way that they just weren't able to do on the road. So you've got to give that defense a lot of credit. If you can play that level of defense and you've got Luka Doncic, you're always going to have a shot. You're going to need somebody else, So they had Jalen Brunson in Game 3, stepped up with a huge game. Dorian Finney-Smith, who's not somebody known for his scoring exploits, had 24 points in that Game 4. You're going to need somebody else alongside Luka, no question. But if you can play that level of defense where you're holding a team like Phoenix under 100 points, then you're going to have a chance. As long as you've got Luka, you're going to have a chance. You need one other guy, and they've been able to find that in game 3 and 4. We'll see if they can take that on the road. But that defense has really been the real key for Dallas. That's been a big difference in them.
All right, final thing, Sean Deveney, I always appreciate your time here, and excellent analysis as always when it comes to the NBA. Heavy.com is where you'll find Sean Deveney's work. Outstanding in terms of giving you the daily coverage that you guys will be looking for if you're an NBA fan. Biggest disparity, truth to fiction, in the portrayals of any of these three individuals in Winning Time. Would it be Pat Riley, the portrayal of Pat Riley, Jerry West, who is certainly taking offense at the way he's being depicted, or Paul Westhead, who appears to be a sniveling, spineless jellyfish of a wimp, when we know that he was one of the more innovative coaches and a very, very confident guy throughout his coaching career. Most far-fetched portrayal in Winning Time of an individual would be whom, Sean Deveney?
Yeah, Jerry West has been the guy who's been probably the most maligned and has publicly said so. But I'd probably say Weston. I agree with you. I mean, he was a very good coach who ran into an already entitled superstar, Magic Johnson. So that whole mess was more on Magic Johnson than it was on Paul Westhead. And we won a championship, by the way, with them. I found that. And Jerry West, he's been right to complain. It's been cartoonish the way that he's been portrayed. But he'll be the first to tell you that he was a miserable SOB to work with. If you read his book, he says that repeatedly. That he has a lot of regret about how he conducted himself. Still, he was never somebody who would throw things, and some of the things that have happened just on that show are absolutely ridiculous. But I'd probably say Westhead. I mean, he was a really good coach, and people forget that. But that was more about Magic Johnson than it was about him.
Westhead, in a quiet sort of way, was every bit as sophisticated as Pat Riley in terms of his presence on a bench. I mean, he dressed well. I mean, not quite as flashy as Riley. He made a good presentation of himself at any time, and is extremely articulate and confident to the point where, I mean, he invented one of those Bill Walsh type of revolutionary concepts when it comes to basketball. With this whole idea that you're going to fire up a shot every 5 seconds, and had a lot of success with it. I mean, one of the most innovative guys. They portray him as if he was a complete loser, like with no faith in himself whatsoever. And, it does seem like a stretch of the imagination. Sean, always a pleasure. Heavy.com is where you'll find Sean Deveney, and it's a pleasure to find him here when he comes on with us talking about the NBA. Thanks so much for being with us, my friend, and enjoy the rest of the postseason.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate it, man.
All right, thanks a lot.
So we always appreciate Sean Deveney's time. He's written for Sports Illustrated. He's written for Forbes.com, doing sports, NBA. And now is with Heavy.com, and I think an editor and a sports writer, NBA writer, plus he is an author. So appreciate his time. He knows the NBA. He's covered the NBA for well over 2 decades. And we've been talking to him for, I think, over 10 years now. He's very honest, and he sort of agreed with me with the Heat. I'm all about the three-point ball. I get it when it's natural, when you're open. But when you're shooting 7 for whatever, like at some point, and the Heat were not struggling inside. The idea is usually, well, you need to shoot the 3 to open up the middle. That wasn't the truth. Like, the Heat were able to attack the middle. Joel Embiid, for whatever he's doing on offense, is not good on defense right now. Like, he's a body, and he can get some rebounds, but he looks slow, and he looks old, and he looks like a guy who didn't play for over a week, and who has all these different physical ailments. And the Heat are playing into what the Sixers want by just settling for 3s. I get it if you're hitting it at a ridiculous rate, fine. But when you're hitting it at a poor rate, I mean, you're shooting 7 for 35. Like, that's a joke. And you have all these guys that can get to the basket. And all these guys, like they do. Tyler Hero can get to the basket. Jimmy Butler can get to the basket. Victor Oladipo can get to the basket. Kyle Lowry doesn't look like himself, but he can get to the basket. Even Strus at times has the ability to get to the hoop. Plus, Bam Adebayo was eating up, even with Embiid out there in the first quarter. It's like Bam gets in foul trouble and he doesn't know what he's doing. That game was really frustrating because it was there for the Heat to win. They were losing for most of from the second quarter on, But they cut it to 3 multiple times in the third and fourth quarter, and they just can never get over the hump. They kept falling in love with the 3, and the Sixers were giving it to them. Like, there's a reason the Sixers were giving them the 3. Couldn't hit the side of a barn, but they were doing really well getting to the basket in the mid-range. They were giving them that. Like, actually, no, you know what? They weren't giving them to him. He were able to take it from him and be successful, but the Sixers kept letting him shoot open 3s, and they kept bricking it. Look, at some point you would think all these guys will hit the 3s, and I'd like to see Robinson come out there because if you're struggling like that, give the guy the ball who you're paying $90 million or whatever, who's one of the best 3-point shooters in the league. But on top of that, the Miami Heat aren't the Warriors. Like, I never thought about them as a team that lives and dies by the 3. They use the 3 to their advantage. But you have a ton of guys that can get to the hoop. Do it. And the Sixers are an elite defensive unit. Like, Maxi's okay. Harris is pretty good. Embiid, when healthy, is okay, but he's not healthy. Harden's a sieve. Like, go to the basket. It was very frustrating to watch that game, as you can tell. And I'm sure Miami Heat fans are frustrated. I'm not writing it off. Like, the Panthers, I don't know what to do. I think that series, if it's not done, it's damn near. I mean, I'll watch, of course, hope that Panthers can get back in it today, but it doesn't look good. That's not the Heat. Like, the Heat, yeah, Embiid came out, but the Sixers didn't blow him out of the water. Harden had a really good game yesterday, and he was still in it. They played really lazy on offense and defense, and I'm unaccustomed to seeing this team do that. Yeah, they had a 4-game losing streak near the end of the year, but then the last month they played out of their mind, and they played well. And we've seen that in these playoffs. So I don't know what's gone on the last couple games, but defensively and offensively, they haven't looked like themselves. They'll be heading home for Game 5 Tuesday. So hopefully we see a different Miami Heat. And you see more of us and listen to more of us. You can do that each and every morning, 7 to 9. Just Google The Defo Show, DEFO. You can check out our exclusive content podcast. Today we talked to a woman that, if you grew up, when I grew up, you know her really well. She's been in over 50 films and television shows. But she was Lieutenant Einhorn in Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. Yes, Sean Young joins us today on Believe.com. Search After Hours, the Believe Network, After Hours with Defo and Lubie. So check that out. That conversation is really interesting. We enjoyed talking to her and talking a little bit of NBA there. And check us out right here every single day, our South Florida focus content on the 5 Reasons Sports Network, the Defo Show with Lubie. Check you out tomorrow. Thanks a lot for tuning in.
Play the ponies in style at Champions, the outstanding simulcasting room at beautiful Hialeah Park. Yes, the grand old lady of thoroughbred racing has never been more vibrant, and you can wager on the races from the top tracks around the country while enjoying a cocktail at the Brass Rail Bar or any of the fine food served throughout the facility. If poker is your game, you're covered in style, and you can play all your favorite Vegas-style games, including blackjack, craps, and roulette, in Hialeah Park's sizzling hot casino. Get a player's card when you walk through the door for all kinds of generous amenities, including our favorite, free play, when you come out to the ultimate casino and entertainment destination, Hialeah Park.
Recently we realized it's not just hurricane season that can hurt us. Any time of year, things can happen to your home or business. And the insurance company can be your friend, but they also can be your enemy. Horizon Public Adjusters, Justina Testa, are here for you to help this process go so much easier. Before you call the insurance company, call Horizon Public Adjusters and Justina Testa at 954-809-8752. Would you go into court without an attorney? So why would you go up against an insurance company without Horizon Public Adjusters and Justina Testa? 7 to 10 times more money recovered with a public adjuster than if you went on your own. If there's no recovery, there's no fee. Give them a call at 954-809-8752. Why go up against insurance companies alone when you can have Horizon Public Adjusters and Justina Testa on your side?
Hey folks, Tony Segreto here. You know, since day one, Catholic Health Services has been part of Old School. And since we've started letting people know about them, it's changed their lives. You see, Catholic Health Services, while being recognized as one of the top places for stroke rehab in the country, it's also about a group of people who not just excel in what they do, from the doctors to the nurses to the therapist, on and on and on. It's how they do what they do every single day that separates them from the pack. They do it with a passion, unmatched, and the inclusion of family in every step of the process. Trust me when I tell you this. If you want the best, unmatched rehab with a special group of skilled, caring people, there is truly only one place, and that one place is Catholic Health Services.